Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2013 Early Learning Hub Technical Assistance webinar. My name is Shane Sasnow, and I will be your facilitator today. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we hope that we can provide you with some useful and actionable information. Today's presentation is on the topic of aligning for coordinated action and outcomes, presented by Anne Murray Allen. Anne is the Vice President of Organization Design and Integration at Conversant out of Boulder, Colorado. Her career has spanned across many sectors, and it includes being the Director of Knowledge and Intranet Management, as well as the Director for Strategic Change at Hewlett-Packard. In addition, she teaches graduate-level management classes and has presented around the world. She recently co-authored a Reflections Journal article titled, "The Nature of Social Collaboration, How Work Really Gets Done." Thank you for being with us, Anne.
I'm glad to be here, Shane.
Great. In addition, we have Megan Irwin with us. She is the Early Learning System Design Manager, and she will be assisting with questions today, as well as Heidi McGowan. We are pleased to be able to present to you and glad that you have joined us. Now, before we get to our main presentation today, I would like to have you take a poll. We'd love to know who's with us. So I'm going to put a poll on really quick, and you can go ahead and fill that out. It'll be up for about 5 minutes, and then it'll close out on its own. So go ahead and fill out the poll. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about our agenda for the day. So we're going to start with webinar logistics, and then we'll move into a quick overview of the hubs, followed by our main presentation for the day. After the presentations, we'll have some question and answer time, review upcoming events, which is just the summit, and provide contact information for our presenter. Now, really quick with the webinar, you'll notice that your phones are muted. Please keep your phones muted, as we have a number of folks on the call, and we want to be sure that we get clear communication with our presenter. You'll also see that you have a chat box on the right-hand side that is available for you to send questions or comments to us throughout the webinar. And we will monitor those and share them as appropriate, including at the end with the questions and answers. At the very end, when we do questions and answers, please keep in mind that the questions and answers are for Anne. Any RFA questions will be noted by staff, and answers will be available in the afternoon at the summit. The scope of this webinar is to provide equitable technical assistance to all potential applicants on this topic. So any questions related to the procurement process need to be submitted in writing to the Early Learning Division, and will be answered in writing and posted online. So we won't be discussing or answering those questions today related to the RFA, because it is a competitive process bound by procurement rules. In the first week of September, the Early Learning Division staff will be doing a series of in-person question and answer sessions regionally. The dates and times for those will be included in the RFA. Today, our focus is really on the discussion of aligning for coordinated action and outcomes, and how you might use that as a strategy in your early learning hubs. Now, I'd like to do a brief overview of early learning hubs. For those of you who have seen this on the other webinars, see if you can pick up some new details, and for those of you who it's new, we appreciate you being here with us today. The vision that has brought us here together is communities working together to improve outcomes for children. That is, communities working together to improve outcomes for children. Some of the basic background information that has led us to the development of this vision is the fact that 45,000 babies are born annually in Oregon, and this equates to almost 300,000 children under the age of 6 here, nearly half of whom are born poor. 40% of these children arrive at kindergarten unprepared to begin their public education. And by third grade, 41% of Oregon's third graders are not reading at grade level. 32% of high school students don't make it to graduation, and this places Oregon in the bottom quartile nationally for receiving high school diplomas. In addition, Oregon has not had a coordinated statewide, results-focused approach to early childhood education or school readiness, at least not yet. Over the last couple of years, a lot of work has been done on the early learning education system, and from that work has emerged this vision for a cohesive early learning system, where communities will collaborate, design their own strategies for delivering early childhood services, and ultimately share collective responsibility for the same outcomes across the state. The Early Learning Council has specified these 3 goals. First, children ready for kindergarten when they arrive. Second, children raised in stable and attached families. And third, services that are integrated and aligned into one early learning system focused on results. And with all of this talk about hubs, there is the question of what is an early learning hub? Our definition of an early learning hub at this point is a self-organized, community-based coordinating body created to provide a system approach to early childhood education that works to improve efficiency and outcomes for our youngest children. At a foundational level, early learning hubs will build on existing community resources and assets, ask the tough questions about what can be done differently to get better results, especially for at-risk children, and it's important to note that communities have the option to define their own strategies and service areas to achieve the outcomes. You'll see this diagram. It shows the basic information about some hubs. The children and families are in the center, surrounded by the community, which in turn is surrounded by the hub. The hubs are tasked with finding the children for universal screening, then working with families to identify what they need and linking them with who will best address those needs. And finally, the hub is accountable for the outcomes that it achieves. This is a time of innovation and a new approach for early learning in Oregon. Under the community-based leadership of early learning hubs, Oregon will bring public sectors, early learning providers, healthcare, social services, and the private sector together locally around the shared outcomes for the first time in Oregon's history. Oregon is innovating in early learning, and it is an exciting time to be involved. The poll is closed. Thank you for doing that. And with that, I would like to turn over today's presentation to Anne-Marie Allen. Give me one moment while I shift to her slides.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm happy to be here talking about a subject I'm passionate about, which is how do we work together across boundaries in a coordinated way that really optimizes outcomes that we care about. You may already know this, of course. Early learning hubs imply collaboration across boundaries, but this doesn't always happen automatically. What we're going to cover today in terms of the objectives, we're going to first explore conditions which increase the likelihood for collaboration success. As I said, it's very difficult collaboration. Even though we intend to work together well, we see the world very differently. And what becomes important is how do we come to a shared view of what we're out to accomplish, and then paying attention to the quality of our relationships as we work together. So we're going to explore not just what are the conditions that will set this up, but also what tends to get in the way. Secondly, we really want to focus on the role of shared facts or data in gaining alignment and in coming to agreement on what's important to focus on. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the role it plays in aligning relationships, but also what are some examples of data that may be important for you and your early learning hubs to reference. Next, how do you use those facts effectively? We live in a world where we're inundated with lots of facts and data. How do we decide what's really important and use them in a way that's effective? And finally, the one that often is left off is how do we have those adjust conversations when we're collaborating so that we're actually learning as we go and we're making adjustments so we stay on track to the outcomes that matter most. What I would say, too, is I'm going to move, hopefully, at a pretty good clip here. And if you have a clarifying question, like you don't understand what I just said or what this means, by all means, type it in chat. Shane will help me keep an eye on that so that I can clarify anything as we go. Now, I'm referencing here a collective impact slide. I believe most of you have already seen it in an earlier webinar. And it's important to put alignment, collaboration in the context of collective impact. This was one particular slide already shown that is really about imagining a different approach to the way we've done it in the past, where we come together in a different way, particularly around complex issues such as early learning. Again, I want to emphasize that it's about all partners working toward the same goal, measuring the same things according to the same data. It's also about cross-sector alignment. In this case, it's not just government and not-for-profit, but more specifically K-12, early education, health, and human services, and let's not forget business and the role they play in this sort of community collaboration. And then it becomes about actually organizations actively coordinating their action. We want to get from this everyone doing their own thing with the best of intentions, like you see with isolated impact, and really get into what brings us together with a shared view so we're in coordinated action. And that's what collective impact is all about. Now, at Conversant, we believe that work gets done through conversation. So once it's time to work together, the way we coordinate our behavior is through having the right conversations. And we like to think of it as there's valuable conversations and there's conversations that are less valuable or actually wasteful. And very simply defined, in this situation, value will be something the families and funders are willing to support, that community partners are willing and able to provide. It's that simple. Waste is any use of time and other resources that does not lead to value that's defined this way. So simple concept becomes very important as we talk about some of the mental models here. Another key point here is what distinguishes value is not data per se, but it's the rate at which we do new and valuable things based on that data. So the data becomes our foundation. It's our key reference point. It's what a North Star in many cases if we're trying to decide how to best operate together. And we aim to increase the rate of valuable outcomes by improving both the timing and the quality of conversations based on shared data. Now, this may sound simple, but it's not always easy. So let's take a closer look. Here you'll see a very simple model, but it's fundamental to strong collaboration. We call it the intersection. In an intersection, you have your own view. And by the way, we all have our own views. We're cognitively, we know this from biological science. Each of us experiences the world in a unique way. And we have a bad habit of assuming everyone sees the world the same way we do. But in point of fact, our cognitive systems are closed loop, and we're actually creating and seeing our own world. If you start with that assumption, what becomes interesting is how do we ever coordinate what we do? We can't get anything done alone. So we have to take our view, we have to combine it with other views, and we have to seek that intersection, something that will move us forward collectively. So presenting my view, listening to your view becomes very important, and what's central to that is the facts that we agree, the data, that we agree are most important to what we're out to accomplish. And I'm going to come back to this model.
I want to check in really quick. We have a couple folks saying that the phone is not clear. If you're having trouble, if it's unclear, will you please write into the chat so we can isolate whether it's an individual's phone or if it's actually our system, because we want to make sure that you can actually hear us. So if you're having any trouble here, please write into the chat.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to be coming back to this model a little bit later, but I wanted to introduce it now as we talk about something also that is an important way to think about your work together as a hub, and that's the cycle of value. But first, let's say more about facts, because the facts in this model are key to orienting people to something beyond their own opinion and getting people to look at the world as it is and the circumstances they agree are most important. So without shared facts, it's just who talks the loudest. And I think we've all experienced that, where we're supposed to work together, we get in a room, a couple people potentially dominate, others feel skeptical, and whoever wins the day is someone who either advocates the hardest or talks the longest. We want to get beyond that for effective collaboration. So shared facts that might help orient people in this context might involve some of the data you see on screen now. So for early learning hubs, you may say, well, let's go get data in these areas, things that have to do with service data, population data, specific to our community, so that we can understand the current state. So I'm not going to read all those to you. I think you can see them. And that'll become data that you can access. Some bits of data may be more important to one community than to another. But it's really, what does this data look like in our community that becomes most important. In addition to quantitative data, you'll have qualitative data that becomes important. We have it presented here as contextual data. For instance, depending on where you live and the community you're operating in, there might be relative state policies that affect you, local policies, priorities and goals in the community. You were part of an earlier webinar where Shane and Heidi discussed asset mapping questions. Questions like, who will be involved, what are their roles and responsibilities, where are the natural places children younger than 6 are in our community, which assets do we have in our community. That becomes data once you answer those questions. It's the context of the community that you're working in. In addition, as community partners, you're going to have partner data. You're going to come to this collaboration with your own constraints based on the organizations you're a part of, and that'll affect how you can make commitments and how available you are to doing this work. In addition, coming from different partner organizations, you'll have prior experience, you'll have expertise in your own area, and that, again, as you talk about it together, can become very valuable in terms of shared facts that you can use going forward. Okay, so following on the intersection model, we've learned over the years in working on probably every continent except Antarctica on the planet, as we've helped leaders in organizations, whether they're a not-for-profit, business, or in some cases government. When leaders are effective, what we've found is they're creating cycles of value. Now we have hopefully a simple to understand model here, but believe me, there's a lot more behind it, and I'll spend a little bit of time walking you through it. But a cycle of value is one where people collaborating are always aligning, then they're moving to collective action, and they're taking the time to adjust based on what they're learning about their action together. And I'm going to break this down a little bit so you understand what's in this cycle of align, act, and adjust. First, align is all about connecting to senior purpose as a source of creative ideas, and it's also a way of committing resources to action. Oftentimes, agreement is confused with alignment. People are nodding their heads. They say, yeah, we agree on what we're out to do, but you have to go deeper to get true alignment. You have to have 3 conversations, which we'll go into in just a moment. If you've got strong alignment, it's a lot easier to get into collective action together, and that involves engaging people closest to the work to get the work done and understanding the role each other plays in getting it done. And finally, adjust is about learning from success and failures along the way, not waiting for once a year we'll do an adjust, but really to say, how are we doing? Are we on track? Are we moving toward our valuable outcome? And what might we need to change along the way? So those are the 3 parts of the cycle of value. So looking at align, breaking it down a little bit, because we believe that work gets done in all areas based on conversations. I've broken out 3 conversations that you would need to do as you're building alignment in your hub. The first one's all about that intersect, building a relationship. So do we have the right people in the room, and what are we out to accomplish together? Why are we here? What is our reason for working together? What brings us here? And what's important to do? Those are some of the questions you'd have in an intersect conversation. And I suggest that's exactly where you start. And take the time it takes to have it and be able to write it on a board, in a document, as a reference point to represent what you've come up with collectively. Secondly, moving to an invent conversation, it's much like brainstorming. Coming up with a surplus of ideas around what's possible. What can we really accomplish? Let's think outside the box. Do we have more than one choice here in terms of how we're going to go about accomplishing this? And, what are all, this is when you'd say, okay, let's just get all the crazy ideas out there and really think about how we can approach this together. And the invest conversation is the one, unfortunately, that a lot of people skip. I find this in working with clients around the world. It's okay, we know what we want to do. We've got a path forward. We're aligned on our purpose. We know we've made a selection on our course of action. What are we going to actually put our resources on, and what will we not do? Often we say, yeah, let's do that, and we add it to already a full plate, which means we don't really get it done. We get spread too thin, people burn out. It's really important to make a clear choice, and in that choice is what you're going to do together and what you're not going to do together. Where's the boundaries of your initiative? It's also where you determine your targeted outcome. What does the end state look like for us? Okay, in the ACT conversations, after you're sure you have that alignment, there's now how do you get the buy-in from all the people, not just the partners that came together to help launch this, but all the people in the community that may need to be engaged. Connecting the thinking behind why you're investing where you are, and what's at stake for everyone, having people understand, why did you make the choices you made? Why are we focused there? Why is that our senior purpose? And then secondly, clarifying, what do we need from everyone now? What do we need everyone to be in action around? How do we want to operate together would be part of this as well. I mean, ground rules for how we want to behave as we're working together. And then finally, and this is important, this sixth conversation, what can we count on each other for? What promises can we make? And I like to use the word promises. What's my promise that I'm going to make to this group as I work with you? And if for some reason I can't make that promise, what's my counteroffer? If you say, no, I really can't, you can't expect me to be at every meeting, for instance, on Tuesday. However, here's my counteroffer. I'll read the minutes the day after, and I'll promise to stay connected. So ACT conversations are about keeping people engaged and coordinated. Okay, and then finally the adjust part of this. Review performance and translate experience into improvement. Don't wait till the very end, whenever the very end really is. Pick in a cycle, are we going to do this monthly? Are we going to do it quarterly? But we're going to have an adjust conversation, and that involves telling the truth about our performance. How are we doing? Are we doing something valuable, or are we stuck? And what are we learning about what we're doing? Let's celebrate what might be successful, do more of that, and where are we missing the mark from what we thought our plan should be. Then the next conversation is based on telling the truth about performance. What do we need to do differently going forward? How can we adjust so we stay on track moving toward our end outcome? I want to say something now about an outcome. Outcome data is a little bit different than our context data. It's really about how are we going to measure success? I like groups to say at the outset, how will we know we're successful? And here's some examples of shared outcome data that might be helpful. These are just in categories, but they're examples of how you might measure. We know we're being successful because we see the needle moving in these areas, or whatever areas in this set or otherwise we're going to select. Okay? And that's when we say measure performance or discuss performance. You'd be doing it against outcomes that you had articulated in your alignment. So in summary, cycle of value, remember this: align deeply, don't stop at agreement, act quickly, and adjust often. It takes many cycles of valuable conversation to create a system of enduring value. As soon as you have an intersection of genuine purpose and sufficient ideas, decide on a course of action and then evaluate it. The quicker you move into action, the quicker you're going to be learning, and then the more you can adjust, the more you'll be able to apply that learning so that you keep going. If you do this correctly, you'll have what we call an ascending cycle of value. Following this cycle, you'll be gaining greater and greater alignment, and one of the real things, the benefits that people don't realize is you improve relationships by doing this, because this involves listening to each other. It involves having intentional conversations. And oh, by the way, I want to point out, oftentimes when people first see this, they think it's all about consensus and never disagreeing. That's not the case at all, actually. These conversations are designed so that if there's differences, if there's contention, that you're listening to each other so you can really pick the best ideas and that the best ideas will emerge. If you're building this foundation of valuable conversation, then in honoring differences and really listening to getting everyone's view in the picture as you pick an intersection, then you'll actually have the foundation to deal with contention, and that can be very energizing. All right? So I'm going to pause now because I want you to do a little exercise. So please think about your own experience in your community. So I want you to think very locally here. And I'm going to put on screen a summary of these 8 conversations I just went over in a second, so don't panic if you go, oh my God, what's she talking about? I didn't write those down. But which of the 8 conversations is the most reliable in your community? And I want you to note that. And then what might be the least reliable? You might find some that are kind of in the middle. So if we go to the next slide here, there's a summary of all of these conversations for each, for the align, the act, and the adjust. And what I'd like you to do, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to go down and look at each of those conversations, and just for your own community, whether it's current state or what you anticipate, where would you put your check mark? Are you off track? Are you, yeah, we're doing it, it's weak, or we're really on track, we're doing a good job of that? And then after 3 minutes, we're going to have you enter it in a poll so we can kind of get a summary feedback from everyone on where you're at. So again, thinking about your own community, where are the conversations? Oh, somebody has a question about what I mean by reliable. Reliable means you can kind of depend on it, okay? That, you know, we reliably have a good conversation in this area. So that's what we mean, that it's repeatable. It's not a like, well, once in a great while we do well in this area, but are you reliable for being good in that area? So that's what we mean. Okay, any other clarifying questions before we say go? Okay, go. Just make a mark, and we're going to ask you to enter it in a poll in just a minute.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're making progress here. This is Shane, your facilitator. I'm going to turn on the poll. It has about a 5-minute limit, so as you get through your answers, go ahead and start working through the poll. Take a couple more minutes here. Thanks. Just one more minute, everybody, and then we'll continue on. Okay, everybody, the poll will be open just a little bit more, but Anna's going to start talking through what she sees.
Okay. Just quickly, this is really helpful. It looks like many of you are on track with finding that intersection, that senior purpose for working together. That's great. Maybe no surprise because we have the super committed on the phone today. You probably are already in conversation with each other on this. Also, it sounds like it looks like a fair amount of you are also on track for really brainstorming creative ways to go forward as a hub. And maybe a little less on the invest side, a little weaker there. You're in action, but maybe not good at clarifying really the expectations everyone has for working together and how you're going to work together effectively. And I'm glad to see that there's some review going on, but again, no surprise, a little bit weak on the adjust conversations. That's pretty typical of a lot of organizations and collaborations we've worked with. So this is good feedback. Obviously, it's awareness building, hopefully for you. We'll talk more about it at the summit. but it's also good information for us to understand where people are at. Okay? Now we're ready to move on to talk a little bit about the barriers to collaboration. We've talked about leaders who create value and strong collaborations following the cycle of value. When they're ineffective, we have creating the cycles of waste. This will probably seem quite familiar to many of you. I know it shows up in my life as well. But when we find ourselves in a cycle of disagreeing, defending our own position, and working hard to destroy that of others, we know we're in a cycle of waste. We're not moving forward our senior purpose or the desired outcome. Waste and value both come from how we deal with differences. And so differences abound, and we can either harvest them for value, or we can try and squash them because they're inconvenient. But yet differences will make us smarter together than separately, and the way you can make a group stupid or dumb it down is to make everyone simply comply with a single point of view without the right conversation for finding an intersection. So cycles of waste. It's important to go over this because I think you have to identify it when it's occurring so you can pivot to something more valuable. So in cycles of waste, there's, again, disagreeing, you're wrong. There's the defending, no, you're wrong, I'm right. And the I must prevail, my idea has to win the day, and I'm going to lobby hard for it. We see a lot of this. Let's face it, in organizations. You may see it in your own community and in trying to solve difficult problems. It's not that it's that unusual. If you're stuck in it, however, there's an impact with a descending cycle of waste. You continue to erode relationships, which makes it harder to align, harder to work together. There's more and more disconnection. People start to, instead of focusing on collective impact, they go back to what worked for them individually or from their sending organizations, and you sub-optimize the end result that you all agreed is so important. Here's some typical signs of waste in a system. One is that you're thinking about your own silo or turf. A silo would be my own organization or my own domain, versus looking at it across boundaries, looking at the whole system. And that's often part of not having a shared purpose and defending your turf. Another sign that you've got waste in your collaboration is if there's chronic unresolved complaints. When complaints come up, they're going to happen. Do you shove them to the side, ignore them, or do you go to work at resolving them? Poor execution of cross-boundary commitments. This is a biggie, where people say, I'm going to work on this for the group, and then nothing gets done or they don't follow through. That's a sign of I agreed to take it on, but I wasn't really aligned with what that meant. We've all experienced covert communication where maybe in a meeting we're saying all the right things, but outside the meeting we're talking about how it's not going to work, or we're actually destroying it in some fashion by talking about it rather than speaking forthrightly. We refer to this often as being in pretense, and I'll say more about that at the summit. But if we're not being honest, if we're withholding and saying something different to different parties, we're in pretense and we're not giving people the best of our thinking in a way that they can act on it. Impotent explanations is when we all sit around and we say, yep, we can't do anything, the economy is really bad, or gee, we can't do anything until we have a new leader at the top, we're just stuck. That's an explanation which may or may not be true, but the point is you can't take any action, so you're stuck. The addiction to indecision is when decisions take a long time, and rather than getting in that cycle of value of acting quickly, adjusting often, people are trying to get it perfect before they take any action. That can really slow down anything valuable. People lose interest. And finally, when you value opinion and habit over facts and innovation, very dangerous in terms of waste in a system. This is why those facts we referenced before are so important. If people aren't agreeing, go back to the facts and say, what do the data tell us, and what is the data we agree is most important to guide our decision making. So look out for these. When you see these signs of waste in a system, you're going to need to work hard to pivot back to a cycle of value. So again, determining value begins with differences. As General Patton said, if everyone's thinking what I'm thinking, then nobody's thinking. This isn't about consensus. This was really about getting the best ideas out there, listening, going to work at listening, and working hard to have the best ideas go forward. And that can only happen through listening and working together. So difference must be mined as a source of value rather than allowed to become a cause for waste. Okay. Value is built or destroyed based on how we deal with these differences. Another way of looking at it is you experience difference in your collaboration. Being right, defending, and convincing sends you on that cycle downward. If, again, you meet it with listening, learning, saying I like to ask the question often when somebody comes with a very different viewpoint, even if my initial reaction is to be annoyed, to say, okay, this person's trying to make a contribution. I need to listen for their contribution. I need to ask more questions to make sure I understand. Maybe they're not saying it the best way. What's the question I need to ask to help them get clear on the contribution they're trying to make? And if we continue that, we're on a cycle of value. And what really determines whether you're going to the right or to the left is the mood and listening. What is your mood? Are you, again, believing people are there to contribute, and are you listening for that contribution? And that would be shown through the questions you'd ask versus the advocating your own point of view. All right? Now I'm going to come back to the intersection at this point, because the opportunities, I'm going to pause for a reflection. I want to pause at this step just to see if there's any questions. I've kind of moved quickly through that. So I'm going to pause for a second to see if there's a burning question about what we've already covered. And if not, we'll keep going. Okay, very good. So coming back to intersection. Opportunities for aligned action begin at the intersection. So let's say a little bit more about this. If you think about coming together, everyone, starting with yourself, but everyone else has a view. They don't always share their view right out front. They may describe a problem or talk about some facts or knowledge they have, but they do have a point of view, and a view includes purposes. Every person has their own personal purpose for being involved. They have their own concerns, what they're most worried about, and they have their own circumstances. They have facts regarding their own involvement that may or may not be obvious to you. Maybe someone was told to come. They didn't volunteer. Maybe they wanted to come, but they have things going on in their life that make it difficult to be there. We don't know what people's circumstances are until we listen to their point of view. So if you approach every conversation understanding everyone has a purpose, a concern, and a circumstance, and if we can get those on the table, we can really move forward. So axioms of the intersection, as I just said, we all have these purposes, concerns. By the way, purposes are what we're for, concerns are what we're against, what we're not for, and circumstances are our own personal facts. When people perceive you are unaware or opposed to their purposes, concerns, and circumstances, they resist, and that produces waste. And we don't want to be contributing waste. We want to get on a cycle of value as quickly and stay there as much as possible. When people perceive you are aware of what's most important to them, then they will tend to join you in something valuable. So finding strong intersections begins with listening. That's the difference, really, between waste, in my opinion, and value, is if I want to stay in a valuable conversation, I'm asking more questions. I'm not advocating as much. And change always happens by listening and then starting a dialogue with the people who are doing something you don't necessarily believe is right, but you get curious about it. There's 3 kinds of intersections. I've had people say, you know, I feel stuck. We keep talking about, for instance, how we're going to get this done. We don't agree on how we should work together. That's a method conversation. That's an intersection for method. What I often say is if you're arguing about your outcome or your result, like you don't agree on the goal, you don't agree on the methods to get there, go back to your purpose and say, okay, let's go back to what we're aligned on at our purpose. What's our senior purpose? What are we out to accomplish? What did we say was important about that? Are we still aligned there? If we're not, what does it take to get aligned? And once again, when people come back to purpose, that will guide them, and it's much easier to have the conversation around our methods and our goals. Alignment at a shared purpose allows improved coordination when people aren't together. Differences around method and outcome are hard to resolve because they lack the context. Purpose, going back to your purpose, gives the context, and from there it's much easier to get aligned in the other areas. Okay, we have before us the conversation prep chart, and I'm going to take a minute to describe this to you. And I'm going to invite you to fill this out. It may be online now that you could download this as a page, but if not, it will be with all the summit materials. So if you don't see it online, you may want to draw a picture of this yourself right now, because this is some homework I'd like people to do. And that is, think about a conversation. Maybe it's one where you checked the red before, like we're off track. It's not going the way we want it to. So what conversation is it time for now in your community around Learning Hub? And what's your own sincere opinion about it? And by sincere, I mean you have a point of view. What's your point of view on that? You know, it could be, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Okay, that's your sincere view right now. Not that you want to stay in that place, but at least record it. And then take the time to list, starting with yourself, put your name down where me is. What are your purposes? What are you for? What are you against? What are your concerns? And what are the circumstances you're operating under? Now list the key players that you need to have the conversation with. And do the same for them, as best you know their position today. And if you can, do more research. Maybe you don't know what their purposes, concerns, and circumstances are. Often, if these are people you know, you can make assumptions, however. And the test for this is if you write something down for somebody else that they would say, and you showed it to them, they'd say, yeah, that is what I'm for or against, versus I had one audience once say, well, here's what I'm for, and this other person is out to take over the world. That's their purpose. And I said, now, honestly, if they saw that, would they agree with that? So you have to, this exercise only works if you put yourself in their shoes. And I'd like you to fill that out for yourself, for the key players. You'll see on the line at the bottom, looking for intersections. Is there an intersection on purpose, concern, or circumstance? Record it there. And think about that. And we're going to talk more about that at the summit. But also, even if you're not able to come to the summit, this will help you prepare for your next conversation with these people. The column at the right, ignore for right now, the relationship meter. I'm going to cover that more in depth next week. So this should help you prepare for the next valuable conversation. Are there any questions about this exercise and your homework?
Apparently, Anne, you are very clear.
Perfectly understood. Okay. So, and if questions come up in the next minutes, by all means, you know, you can either type it in or, you know, raise your hand or whatever. But now we're going to pause for questions in general about how to work together, how to build a strong collaboration, any of the concepts presented so far. What would you like to either discuss? Okay, who and how is the initial conversation, from Patrick, who and how is the initial conversation initiated? That's a great question, Patrick. That can happen a number of ways. Maybe there's a scheduled meeting and you know the conversation needs to be covered in that meeting. Maybe it's an offline conversation that's really critical because you're working hard to bring people together with a shared view. So it could be you initiating the conversation. It could be somebody else is going to want to have this conversation with you. But this should be one that you see as valuable and important, and you're trying to design it almost ahead of time so you're prepared to look for the intersection with the other key players. And we have a conversation from Brenda. Is the intent that we come with these completed to the summit with our partners? That's ideal. It's not required. But if you do, I think you'll get even more out of my session at the summit. Okay, good question. So any other questions about either the exercise or the content of this webinar? No, I can't believe it. By the way, I've boiled down like a one-day seminar into 1 hour, so that's telling me something if there's no questions. All right.
Well, it seems very clear. And if you were to give one piece of advice, this is my question to you, if you were going to give one piece of advice to those who are on the webinar today, and the groups and individuals, what would that one piece of key advice for how to get started be?
How to get started? I would start with going back to the conversations on the cycle of value and use it as a checklist. The diagnostic slide that lists those 8 conversations, and start with a line and say, have we had this conversation? And maybe we're already in action, but we didn't really do all the aligned conversations. Go back and do them and record them. And take the time it takes to get really a deep alignment. We found if nothing else occurs, deep alignment pays off. Your actions go much more quickly. The tendency is to fly to action too soon. People go off different directions, then they have to hit the reset button because it doesn't all add up. So I would use that as a checklist to make sure that you're not skipping valuable conversations. The other bit of advice I would have for people is this is 10 minutes to learn and a lifetime to master. We covered concepts in an hour. None of them are intellectually that difficult. However, in putting them into practice, that's where it's difficult. It's like, I think of it like a golf swing. You can learn to swing the club pretty quickly, but you're not having the effect you want unless you practice, and you have to keep course correcting. So look at this as a discipline, as something that you do all the time. Identify when you're in a cycle of waste, ask the question out loud, what can we do to shift it? And don't be afraid to stay in the conversation until you have it. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Okay, well, if you have any other questions before we are off for the day, feel free to write them through. Otherwise, I'd like you to know that this slide deck is already posted on the website. The rest of the materials, the worksheet, will also be posted on the website soon. And I'm going to really quickly jump over to a different set of slides so I can provide you with the follow-up information for today's webinar. At this point, the next event is the summit on August 12th from 8 to 4:30. There's lots of people signed up. It's going to be quite an event. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Here is Anne Murray Allen's information if you would like to contact her and talk more in depth or ask questions about today's presentation. In addition, we have Megan Irwin, the Early Learning System Design Manager's contact information. At the bottom of this page, which I will leave up for a while, you will see the contact, or all of the website, the URL, where you can find previous website recordings, the website recording for today, which we will put up as soon as we have it, as well as the slides and other resources from the various websites, or webinars, and materials for the upcoming summit. With that, I'm going to check and see if there's any last questions. We have one person who says their silence is not due to total understanding. She will do the homework and hope to understand better after the summit. Love the information. It's a great next step for us, and I agree. Thank you, Ann, so much for being here today with us.
Thank you.
And with that, we hope to have the summit materials up by Friday, and we hope to see you all there next week. Have a great day, everyone, and do good work. Where are the slides link is one last question. It should all be on the page there when you go to OregonEarlyLearning.com. Under Major Initiatives is a drop-down menu, and the Early Learning Hubs is in that drop-down menu, and then Technical Assistance Info and Resources. On that page is everything that we've put up. If it's not there yet, if the link is not there yet, we will have it up within the next couple days. We have to get the recording and make sure we have all the right materials. With that, thank you, and again, have a great day. Bye.